Hello and welcome to today's webinar, AX Roundtable, AI in Programmatic Advertising. My name is Ricky Birzani. I am the Senior Director of Marketing here at AUDIENCEX. I just want to thank you all for taking a bit of your time today to join us. I'm going to give this just a couple of minutes to let people finish joining us. And while I do, I'll go over a couple quick notes before we get started. First, we will be sending a recording of this webinar to all attendees. And registrants afterwards, so everyone can look out for that soon. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be taking some time to answer any questions that you may have at the end of today's presentation. So if you do have any, you can go ahead and submit them at any time via the Zoom's Q&A feature at the bottom of their interface. Before diving in, we will launch a couple of quick poll questions to get a feel for everyone's experience and comfort level with AI and programmatic. So you'll see two questions here. Please take some time to answer them, and we'll go ahead and share the poll results shortly after. First question is, are you or your company currently using AI tools? And the second one is, do you currently advertise on programmatic platforms? And while you're answering those, I'll go ahead and get started with the agenda. So today's agenda is divided into three sections. We'll start with our speaker intros, dive into our panelist conversation, and follow up with audience Q&A. I am pleased to introduce our presenters from AUDIENCEX. Here we have Garrett McDonald, who is our Chief Commercial Officer, Bernie Ray, who is our VP of Product, and Paul Beck, who is our client partner. Thank you all very much for being here today and joining our discussion. And if you're just joining us, welcome. You should see a poll open on your screen. Feel free to respond as we'll be closing that in just a few moments to share our results. So today, our panelists, experts will weigh in with their own perspectives and expertise on AI and programmatic advertising, from data privacy to optimization and more. Again, if you have any questions at this point, feel free to submit them via the Zoom's Q&A feature at the bottom of the interface. So the polls should be closing. We're going to share the results of our audience poll to see what everyone's general experience with AI and programmatic looks like. So here for question number one, are you or your company currently using AI tools? Essentially, it's almost an even split between it. There's a lot of folks using AI for digital advertising, but generative AI, and a lot of folks are using both. So it's good to see that either companies are starting to use AI and get their feet wet in it, or they plan to use it soon. This is what we are seeing also with a lot of the clients and customers that we work with. Next question, do you currently advertise on programmatic platforms? Yeah, as expected, yeah, we do expect to see most people starting using their partner are having a self-service platform for programmatic as well. So great to see these results. The speakers will keep these in mind as we go through our questions here. So now that we got to know everybody, let's go ahead and get started. To start us off, can you give a little bit of background insight on role AI and machine learning technology have played in programmatic advertising to date? Brittany, we'll start with you.
I think that's an excellent question to kick off the webinar with, but I actually am going to hijack the first minute here because I just want to give the audience a brief explanation of the difference between AI, machine learning, and I know you didn't mention it, but algorithms, because I think that that's an important part to it as well. So with algorithms, you can think of these basically as the steps taken to get to an outcome. One of the most well-known algorithms is a Rubik's Cube. So, I just want to emphasize that algorithms are not done just by machines. It's also a human thing as well. We do algorithms every day. Think about at dinner, when you go to do a recipe, you go to make dinner off of a recipe, you're following an algorithm. Machine learning is, as the name suggests, machines that learn over time. So they basically take the information that's fed to them and they continue to learn. Just give a quick example. Let's say you have a machine and its task is to sort fruit, and you tell it apples are usually round and bananas are yellow. And then you showed it an orange. You have to tell it oranges are usually orange, otherwise it's going to think it's an apple, and apples are usually red and green. And so as you tell it these kind of prompts, it continues to learn, and you don't need to tell it every time what each fruit is. So that's machine learning, and machine learning usually does use algorithmic methods to find patterns, but it doesn't have to. So they're not one and the same. And then AI is artificial intelligence, and that is essentially machines doing tasks that we thought previously only human intelligence could do. AI does often use machine learning, and it does often use algorithms to perform its tasks, but it doesn't have to. These are not mutually exclusive things. You can essentially have AI that just works off of a massive database, large amount of data, and it doesn't learn over time, but a lot of AI do learn over time. I think for the simplicity's sake of this webinar, we can all kind of agree to just interchange those, or maybe refer to everything as AI, but I did want to make it known that there are nuances and differences between those three. So Ricky, I'm hoping you wouldn't mind just repeating your original question, and I'll hop back in and definitely answer that for you.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, can you give a bit of a background insight on the role AI and machine learning technology have played in programmatic advertising to date?
Right. Okay. So AI in general has actually been around since the 50s, and it's gone through these periods of what are called AI winters, where essentially there's been less funding or less attention towards AI for one reason or another. But actually, since about the late 90s, there's been steady progress in AI. And digital advertising, as most of you know, started in the late 90s. So it was perfectly placed to inherit the benefits of AI. To give a quick timeline on digital advertising, we had ad networks that launched in the late 90s. And then in the early 2000s, we started to see RTB and programmatic advertising. And then about 7 years later is when DSPs launched. And it was around this time that AI and machine learning began to play a more significant role in programmatic. So if you're following my timeline there, that's AI and machine learning in programmatic since about 2007 to 2010. It was around the late 2010s when AI-driven programmatic platforms really gained popularity. So these strategies became standard practice. So I don't want to steal the thunder to later questions in the webinar, but just know that if you're doing some form of programmatic today, you're not doing it without some form of AI, ML algorithms.
Yeah, I think I could jump in now, Ricky. I mean, I think to piggyback on what Brittany was saying, and especially keeping that like timeline in mind, I mean, I think it's fair to argue that in some ways AI, at least at this point, is really like the foundation of what programmatic advertising is today. Because if you think about it, the whole idea of programmatic advertising is allowing us to act like in near real time, like within milliseconds, in a way that a human could never do. And it works because we have platforms that have these built-in machine learning algorithms to make those decisions like super quickly. And you know, those decisions mostly around bidding are made using AI that looks at a variety of factors, like, you know, based on desired outcomes. And it's deciding what's the best price, should we bid at this exact moment to this user from this part of the country or world, you know, on this website or app. If you just had like the immediacy of the decision-making as the only consideration, then you could probably tackle that with a simple set of rules, which wouldn't require machine learning. So let's say, for example, you knew that you just wanted to bid a $2 CPM for every user that meets a certain set of criteria. You could probably build automation that would accomplish that without actually having machine learning involved. But as those rule sets become more and more complex, you start to need machine learning to account for all those different variables and make all like the billions of decisions that the platforms are making each day. Like that, it's necessary to make that happen. And then because of AI, well, I mean, AI almost by definition is always learning. And so the platforms therefore are kind of getting smarter and smarter every day as a result of this AI. So every transaction that's being made is really like an experiment of sorts, where the platform is monitoring all those variables, like the where, the when, the who, et cetera, and then watching the outcomes to keep learning which combination of variables performs the best. So I think it's exciting stuff, and it's going to be fascinating to watch as this kind of continues to improve over time.
Yeah, just building on the history, the timeline, and talking about artificial intelligence and the 6 different types of artificial intelligence. So we talked about algorithms as a set of instructions to solve a problem. And then you've got machine learning, you've got deep learning, which is really a type of machine learning using a neural network architecture or framework. And then you've got the neural networks themselves. You've got NLP, or natural language processing, which we actually see a lot of that with chatbots, where you go to a site and they say, how can I help you? And it's all based on your responses. They'll, have connected list or a journey map of responses, book a meeting. Would you like some content on top of that? And so cognitive computing, the 5th one, this, in my opinion, is the most advanced, most closely related to that natural or human intelligence that Brittany was speaking of. And then finally, computer vision. We'll talk about some of these, in more detail. But, all of this is really trying to mimic and replicate, humans and animals that have conscious reasoning and understanding. And, as the most intelligent species, we're able to do analytical thinking and mathematical or, computational intelligence. And all of this is really used to solve complex problems by analyzing large data sets. And there's really it's broken into 2 kind of vectors of, strong AI and weak AI, believe it or not. So strong AI being most closely related to human intelligence or human level intelligence, also referred to as like artificial general intelligence. Think of movies like Westworld or Star Trek, or, the type of AI that doesn't really exist today. And just know that this is Google's long game in the end. They want to win the race to strong AI and AGI, or artificial general intelligence. And then there's weak AI, which is probably a bad definition, but, narrow AI, specialized AI, been around since the age of modern computing, as Brittany mentioned, performs a single task extremely well, simulating, human intelligence, but operates within a limited context in a very narrowly defined problem, like optimizing media spend or identifying fraud or even driving a car. And so AI and ML are really all around us, as we've kind of pointed out. I just wanted to hit on maybe more specifically about some of the areas where we're seeing it with a little bit more detail. So like, for example, traffic shaping, looking at massive volumes of historical trading data to predict the likelihood of future events. So being able to answer the question, is this bid request, likely to be bid on? If it is bid on, is it likely to generate an impression? If it is going to generate an impression, what's the price or the value of the impression? And then we see a lot of AI and ML with, dynamic creative optimization, for example. There's really a misconception. Dynamic creative variation is oftentimes confused with dynamic creative optimization, where, marketers are able to predict what actually resonates with, each segment of their audience. So it's really true personalization. And then there's contextual. So, going beyond the semantic page level analysis of the text on the page, with advanced contextual AI, a marketer can really understand, for example, what's inside the video to drive better outcomes. And, we see a lot of AI with video, whether it be in the, the management or the distribution of video. Magnite just announced today the application of AI with video monetization. And then finally, measurement, by using AI with massive data sets, you can apply traditional measurement mechanisms or methods, and then also panels of data sets to really produce those kind of insights that not only tell you what happened, but also what you should do about it next, which I think is the most exciting or fascinating part of advertising and programmatic today.
Great, thanks, Garrett. So we'll go to our next question. We've seen a lot of focus on generative tools. Can you talk about some other significant AI tools used in programmatic?
Yeah, I can start with that one. So The most important capability right now, at least in my opinion, is being able to create content that's suited or tailored to a particular subset of your audience. So, you know, for images and video, the most commonly used tools are generative adversarial networks that actually generate the content for you. For audio, use WaveNet as an example, or for text, there's recurrent networks called LSTM. Not as familiar with those capabilities, but you know, the one that's most exciting for me, as I mentioned a little bit ago, is the computer vision and being able to, you know, really understand how to apply that with digital advertising and programmatic, keying off of all of the components of video, you know, the sight, sound, and motion, and being able to understand, you know, what's inside the video. So the logos, the images, the faces, celebrities, you know, sentiment analysis, and being able to really understand, you know, how that content, you know, relates or resonates with your audience with respect to things like brand suitability and brand safety. So knowing exactly what's inside the video so that you can go beyond the app, beyond the channel, and beyond the genre with your targeting. So by aligning, you know, messaging and creative next to that topic of content, we've seen performance and outcomes, you know, considerable improvement with performance. And I think those are really all the things that marketers care about, is being able to align their creative next to the topic of content to really drive more relevance, recall, and response and lift, and all those things that are so important. So
yeah, I could add some others to that too. I mean, like I said earlier, like AI is such an integral part of programmatic advertising. And so obviously, like, we depend on a lot of different AI tools to make that happen. One that comes to mind is cross-device targeting and sequential advertising. So like using AI to analyze user behavior across different device types, and then like determine the order and the messaging of each ad. So like as an example, how do users respond when they first see an ad, say in a native format, and then you follow that up 2 days later with a CTV ad, right? You know, do they respond differently maybe when the order is reversed or when the timing is changed? So like all these different variables that can be that can come into play to getting that right. And then AI is not only used just in the analysis of like how people are responding to the ads, but even in how the platform is able to determine that it's the same person who's viewing one ad on their desktop and maybe another ad on their TV screen. So like AI algorithms are being used to analyze and correlate the data from like all these different sources that can be seen, you know, from user behavior, like logins and browsing behavior, app usage, purchase history, so on. And all of that is then being used to link user identities across devices and then determine with a high degree of certainty that 2 or more devices belong to the same user. I guess another one I would mention would be, it's a really important one, the creation of lookalike audiences, which is very often crucial to successful campaigns. So similar to some of those same techniques used to try to determine that it's the same person across devices, like lookalike audiences are created by segmenting users based on their online behaviors, their demographics, that kind of thing. And the idea is to find people who will likely respond to an ad in a similar fashion to people who, like, we already know how they've responded, right? So from seeing their behavior. So we're finding people that look like them and then hope that they're going to behave in a similar fashion. And that's also really important in expanding reach so that you're not continually showing your ads to the same group of people. So, you know, allows you to find additional users to bring into the fold.
Garrett mentioned a few types of AI that I also want to highlight. He actually mentioned them, I think, in the first question, but computer vision, which Garrett did talk about in this question, is a type of AI that I think is really fascinating, but in a different context than what Garrett was talking about. So Garrett's talking about more computer vision and understanding it in terms of videos. But what I think is really cool about what computer vision can do is understanding and interpreting visual data for your creatives. So let's say an AI that optimizes based on what hex colors are used in your creatives or the tone of the images in your creatives. So I think that one's really cool. I believe Garrett mentioned natural language processing, which uses large language models. And this is similar to computer vision, but instead of understanding visual data, it understands and interprets human language. And so that can do things like sentiment analysis, where let's say the sentiment of user-generated content is observed and then optimized against or reported on. So we understand in your Twitter, what if you're happy or you're sad, those kind of things, if you like the brand or not. So that's all using natural language processing. And then the last one I'll touch on, which Garrett did mention earlier, was deep learning. So Garrett gave a very good explanation of what deep learning is. I'm going to just kind of dumb it down a little. It is a subset of machine learning, and you can basically just think of it as a smarter version of machine learning. And deep learning is what basically affords us the ability to do things like detect fraud by looking for patterns and anomalies in ad impression data. So I think those are the three I just wanted to mention.
Great, thank you all. Next question here is, how can AI tools empower data science, and how is that leveraged in programmatic?
I can go ahead on this one as well. So if you've done any research on AI, you might have come across a saying that AI does the 4 Ds. I've also seen the 5 or the 6. I'm going to count them really quick. Hopefully I can get these all for you. We've got the dirty, the dull, the dangerous, the difficult, the dear, and the distant. I did count those on my fingers. That was 6. I don't think all of these are relevant to programmatic, but like the dirty and maybe the dangerous, but I definitely think the dull is. To give you guys a little bit of an example here, in one of my first positions in advertising, I was low gal on the totem pole, and I had to literally go in domain lists and put them into browsers, open them up, categorize the domain, see if there's any, make sure they're brand safe, see if there's any ad stacking. This was a very dull and tedious, time-consuming task, and that's something that AI can take off of our plates. It can do that for us by automating that tedious task. So yeah, I can scour millions of data points to characterize them, and then it helps assist in the complex data analysis of those millions of data points.
Yeah, that's I didn't know about the 6, but that's good to know. I think the thing that I would add to that with respect to data science and how it's being leveraged in programmatic, I'll give you an example of a product that we launched earlier this year called AUDIENCEX Intelligence, which is really a suite of AI-powered solutions leveraging log-level data to explore all the affinities with certain brands and products, and then that's crosswalked to the world's largest consented and opted-in data set of cross-channel attributes. And then that output is a much more potent set of predictive audiences that have a much higher likelihood of converting versus the audiences that are usually bought off the shelf in a DSP, as an example. So in contrast to, and Paul mentioned this earlier, lookalike audiences are usually built off of like a demographic data set or a gender data set, which for the most part are wildly inaccurate in advertising. These predictive audiences are more like act-alike audiences. And so the second component, or the second primary component of our AUDIENCEX Intelligence solution, is building custom algorithms. So driving better outcomes on behalf of advertisers by allowing us to put all of our clients working media towards the highest value audiences for their campaign objectives. And I guess to put it very simply, we optimize to sales. So that's one thing the one thing that matters to all advertisers. And there's AI applications that are really foundational to this marketing science, including process discovery, where you combine technologies like computer vision or just general pattern recognition, and then ML and AI to create full-blown business outputs, also commonly referred to as task mining. And we also use AI with data migration, where all these advances in automation have made, and Brittany mentioned this, with the dull, it's like all of these repetitive and manual data migration, workers, and makes all of that obsolete with robotic process automation. And so, we've had great success in the application of AUDIENCEX Intelligence for programmatic campaigns in those two areas of building predictive audiences, as well as generating custom algorithms on behalf of our clients.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead and jump to our next question here. What are some ways AI can be leveraged for campaign optimization?
All right, well, I guess as the client partner here, I'll start on that one. And you know, this has been touched on already, but to me, I feel like dynamic personalization of ads is really like a really important way that we're using AI to optimize campaigns. And in some ways, like, I feel like it's the holy grail with respect to how we can continue to keep squeezing more and more performance out of programmatic campaigns. There's the old quote that we probably all heard, the John Wanamaker quote, and as someone who grew up in Philadelphia, I'm partial to this, but saying, you know, about half the money that I spend on advertising is wasted, but I don't know which half that is, right? And the idea being, obviously, that like you're wasting your money if you're marketing to the wrong people, right? You don't want to spend a dime if you could help it, showing an ad to someone who's not going to be interested. And now I guess probably over 100 years later, the key is not about finding the right half of the people to market to. It's getting closer and closer to finding the right person to market to with the right message for that person, right? So we're definitely not there yet, but as the technology keeps improving, we can kind of keep making smaller and smaller the size of each group for which we're creating this unique messaging. So instead of messaging to the masses, we can start to pinpoint who we're sending messages to. So like instead of segmenting based on broad categories like male or female or age group and that kind of thing, we can start to get much more specific about like each message and who's getting that. So like, you know, we could have a group of males who live in the Midwest, who like ice hockey, who travel frequently, who are trying to quit smoking. Like you can get very, very granular and then start to create these groups that target people based on that. And right now, for a lot of that in programmatic, we're still controlling the variables that go into the customization. So like the headline, the image, color choices, calls to action. In other words, we're kind of still feeding the system the options for each variable. Like we give it 5 choices of here are some choices for calls to action that you know that we can feed and see how they perform. But you could see how you know, that the system probably could start to use generative AI to make its own suggestions and then run small tests to decide which ones are worthy of running on a larger scale. This is kind of what Google's already doing with its Performance Max product. And then a lot of others in the walled garden ecosystems are embracing that as well. So I think it's really only a matter of time before we start to see that in programmatic as well, where the generative AI is kicking in and it's starting to make these suggestions that will then be run as tests to see like what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, building on that, when I hear the question around campaign optimization and how AI is leveraged, I always think of the recent ANA study and some of the findings on Google and our entire industry is sitting up a bit straighter in the chairs after releasing the findings. And Paul, you kind of hit on this too with, I know 50% of my ad spend is wasted. I just don't know which half. I mean, the unknown delta is virtually eliminated with that full log level path analysis. So, the point is, I guess, that humans alone can't possibly be making the kind of campaign optimizations that drive that value. It's way too consuming, and far too many steps to make a change. No media buyer is really sifting through massive data sets looking for nickels and dimes. They're really looking for the big rocks, because it takes time to make every little optimization to save a few bucks here and there, but also you have to let those optimizations run before you can then make changes, usually about 4 to 7 days. So with AXI and AUDIENCEX intelligence, we're creating these custom algorithms that provide the visual cues like a trail of breadcrumbs to find, those areas of optimization or areas of opportunity to really increase those efficiencies and then drive that effectiveness. And that's one of the things that I think has been so powerful for marketers, and just giving them their time back and being able to go after those optimizations that may not in and of themselves be meaningful, but the cumulative effect is powerful.
I just want to jump in and kind of emphasize what you're saying there, Garrett, which maybe I'll say it in a little bit of a different way, which is just that the AI basically possesses the ability to analyze and account for millions of data points and their intricate interactions with each other, which the human brain, we can't comprehend that level of complex interaction. And, we have cognitive limits. So I guess maybe I'm all for giving examples because I'm going to give another example here. So let's say you're running a campaign and you see that it's not performing well from 2 to 4 a.m. Our human brain is going to say, okay, shut that off because that's part of that 50% of wasted spend, right? But what an AI can do is say, wait a minute, we know that this behavior on this site performs really well from 2 to 4 a.m. So normally I will optimize away from it. But if I come across that person on that site, I'm going to optimize towards that during 2 to 4 a.m. So that is a very, very basic example because I have a human brain, but extrapolate that, just think about that across many, many different interactions and dimensions. Paul, when you were speaking, you made me think of another point here, which is the concept of explore and exploit in data science. So basically, as humans, we grapple with the decision of when to explore and when to exploit what we already know. And because of that, we tend to exploit more than we do explore. Think about like when we set up campaigns, we set them up with audiences that we think are going to buy our products, rather than setting up a campaign that's targeted to everyone and letting the AI do its work, letting the AI know and use math and tell us when to explore and tell us when to exploit what we already know. So that's one thing that the AI can do that the human brain just can't do.
Great, thank you, everyone. We'll go to our next question here. What are some advantages of using custom algorithms, particularly when testing and optimizing?
Yeah, I could start with this one too. I mean, because I think when Garrett was talking about our AUDIENCEX intelligence, AXI technology, that's really there's a lot built into it, a lot, but the custom algorithm piece is, I think, really important. And what we're doing is we're using those custom algorithms that we can bring in, and then it informs decisions that are made in the platform rather than leaving it up to the platform's own algorithm. So we're bringing in these custom decision-making algorithms, and this leads to optimization decisions that are much more tailored to the individual client than what the platforms would do on their own. And it also gives an advantage to the client's bidding, right? Because we're in a bidding ecosystem, and it gives advantage to bids through differentiation versus what others might be bidding. And so, since Brittany's been giving all the examples, I'll give one. It's not perfect, but I think it kind of illustrates what I mean here. Like, so for those of you who use Waze for navigation, you've probably come across situations where Waze tells you to get off the highway, or freeway, as we say in California, and take side streets, right? But I've noticed that sometimes so many people seem to be following those same set of instructions that all of a sudden now the side streets become jammed, and you've lost the advantage that you had. Now, if Waze would give each person like a different route to follow on side streets, then each of those people arguably could benefit, right? But it seems to me that the algorithms don't work that way. And I think in some ways, this is similar to what the platforms are doing, where they're making broader optimization decisions that span multiple advertisers that are all participating, at the same time in this auction network. Whereas using outside, like more bespoke algorithms, and then having those influence the decisioning within the platforms, that can create like a unique advantage for each advertiser, like traveling on their own side street without traffic, right? So in theory, this could lead to a win-win for everyone in the platform. Although, I mean, to be frank, my focus is on generating the best outcomes for my clients. So as long as I'm creating a better performing campaign for them, using that advantage, then I'm happy. But you could see how from a theoretical perspective, like the more participants that bring in their own customized decisioning, the more people are, in a sense, spreading out to those different side streets. And then, it can be a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, great analogy. Just building on the network-wide optimizations. I mean, we hear quite frequently from marketers that, they want more and more control and transparency into the way that ads are bought and sold. And part of that is increased cost and competition, and also, the lack of transparency and the lack of control. And so marketers wanting to take that back, you know, with unbiased decisioning on media investments or unbiased measurement. You know, they want to control the power of the pen to make the optimizations on their own behalf, as opposed to, like Paul was saying, across a variety of SSPs and a variety of demand sources and all of that sort of thing. So they don't necessarily have the resources or the bandwidth to do it themselves, though. But there is a human tendency to buy custom, you know, made for you and kind of what's in it for me. And, you know, everyone wants custom, but not everyone knows how, and not everyone has the resources or the time. And so that's where we can step in and really provide a lot of value on behalf of our clients.
I know we're not doing the webinar Q&A portion yet, but I did see a question come through that I thought fit really well into this question, Ricky. So if you don't mind, I'm going to answer that here in answering your question as well. The question that came through was about what makes our solution stand apart from industry leading algorithm solutions. And so Garrett and Paul have both answered that in this question as well. But just to add to it, I would say transparency is one of the reasons. So many custom algorithms will allow you to see the specific reasoning behind the decisions they're making, which could be easier to interpret. And that could be for peace of mind, but it could also be for action. And I say action because as humans, we have a perspective that AI just doesn't have. So we are not on this call telling you use AI all the time, AI this, AI that. It's also you have to have that human aspect in it as well. And so I think that that's important to be able to understand why the AI does what it does. And then the other reason is flexibility and customization. So custom algorithms typically allow you to customize the exact combinations of dimensions to optimize against, and they can offer far more variables than many native algorithms. So most native algorithms might be working off of maybe 5 to 10 different dimensions, where a custom algorithm gives you many more different dimensions to cherry pick or use.
Great, thanks, Brittany. So we'll go ahead and get to our next question, and any other questions we're going to continue. We'll get to the Q&A section and answer those.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Actually, that was a very relevant. So that was good to pull that one out. Next question is, how can AI tools help marketers get more out of their own first-party data sources? Paul, we can start with you here.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just thinking about it. I could start with that. So, I mean, first-party data, as we all know, is going to become increasingly more and more important as we head toward Google deprecating third-party cookies, which we do expect to happen. And so, so many of the AI tools, that a lot of which we've talked about already, they are using first-party data as sort of like a key to feed their algorithms. So, for example, like content optimization tools analyze vast amounts of customer data, like customer interactions and purchase history and website behavior, engagement metrics, in order to identify patterns and trends, correlations, that kind of thing within the data. And then that reveals valuable insights about customer preferences and expected behaviors. And then that information can be used to create customized content and better target campaigns with tailored messaging, like we talked about, product recommendations, offers that will best resonate, like with a specific customer segment. And AI can also leverage first-party data to develop predictive models, right? Which is really exciting and I think really important, that will forecast customer behavior and outcomes from those predictive audiences. So by analyzing historical data patterns, it can predict future actions like customer churn, lifetime value of a customer, likelihood for that customer to purchase. And the marketers use these insights to optimize their marketing strategies, personalizing experiences, improvements, improve their efforts, let's say, toward customer retention. And like when you talk about lifetime value of a client, AI tools are useful in analyzing behaviors, patterns of behavior that then can make predictions about how valuable each of those customers, their existing customers, are. And of course, that determination is only possible with first-party data showing you who is your first, who are your current customers, that kind of thing.
Yeah. There's really three types of first-party data streams that we're leveraging. The first is CRM data. The second is IP address-based web events. And the third is any sort of purchase data. Some advertisers have some of that, some have all of that, some have, very little of that. And the reality is no brand or publisher's first-party data is enough to scale. But by crosswalking that to their log level data and then other fully consented and opted in data sets, we create these predictive audiences that, lower thresholds of data are quite, useful. So the audiences have a much higher likelihood of converting, and they're able to leverage their first party data to combine with other data sources in a very privacy safe and compliant way with whether it's a state to state different jurisdictional interpretation of data handling or different countries internationally. So we found that these three data sources really help to power those predictive audiences in a meaningful way.
Great, thank you. We'll jump to the next question here. How are you using AI today, and how is it being leveraged for your clients?
I could take this one, and it's a reiteration of things we've already talked about, but I think the creation of predictive audiences using our AUDIENCEX intelligence product, which is not only our own technology, but it also incorporates partnerships with like third-party companies that have like really amazing technology, and we're able to take data showing how users behave, and this could come either from a user's first-party data that they give us, or it can actually, even for clients who we've already been running campaigns for them inside the platform, it can actually use the log data from the platforms that show the behaviors of all the people that have been seeing this ad and reacting to it in some way or not reacting to it. And then it can add to that, or sort of, marry that with all this external data, that show user behaviors, that it can come from credit card data, all privacy compliant, of course, but it's looking at all the different things people do, like purchase data from credit cards, hotels, retailers, airlines, etc. And from that, we can create this customized audience that the AI predicts will be much more likely to perform, and whatever that perform is. And I know, Garrett, you mentioned everyone's about sales, but like I have clients where they're not actually sometimes selling something. There could be a nonprofit, it could be, so there's other flavors too of like some of the clients that we manage at AUDIENCEX where their goal may be different than a sale, but it could be someone filling out a form, or someone engaging with the site that's going to give them information or things like that. And anyway, the AI then is going to create these predictive audiences that will predict that people are going to do, that this is an audience that we should be targeting. And then that audience is actually then imported into the platform. So now we're trading against that and using that as a prospecting audience in a way that can expand reach and improve KPI performance. And we've definitely been seeing really good results with that, particularly click-through rates that are just way, way higher than what we see from the lookalike audiences that are typically built using the platform's own algorithms.
Great, thanks, Paul. We'll go ahead and jump to our next question. What industries, and it's kind of like a piggyback, what industries do you think will see the biggest impact of AI in advertising, and why?
I'll jump on this one. So aside from all industries, I think a really good example would be pharma. I used to do a lot of campaigns for pharma, and it's crazy how strict and regulated that industry is. I mean, it's not crazy, it makes sense, but you have to have certain text on the creative for a certain length of time, and you can only target certain elements in different groups. I mean, it's super regulated. And so I think AI is just primed for finding the right audience, considering all of the regulatory constraints while still respecting user privacy and data.
Again, as a client partner, I can add to that, like thinking about some of my own clients that I manage. And I think we're going to see a big impact for retailers, anyone that's selling things online or in stores, because the technology, as we've said, is going to make us more and more efficient at finding the right audiences and then tailoring that right message to them. Like online behavior, like online purchase behavior, I think is really fascinating because there's a lot of psychology that can affect someone's decision to pull the trigger and buy something, particularly if it's on impulse. So the likelihood of an ad enticing someone to make a purchase, as you can imagine, can depend not only just on the ad itself, but like on which website or app or CTV platform they're seeing that ad. And then other factors like time of day or day of week, those kind of things. And that's exactly where AI can thrive, right? It's helping us to improve the rate in which the audiences that we're targeting go all the way down that funnel toward making the purchase. I guess another category that I think will really benefit are those whose like target customer base is very niche and hard to find. So I manage clients, especially some B2B ones, where they're trying to reach a very small group of people who would be interested in their product, and then even a smaller group of people who actually are authorized to make purchasing decisions for their company. So it's almost a little bit like a needle in a haystack. And so for many of those reasons that we already mentioned, I think AI is going to make it a lot easier to find those particular people and then target the right ad to them. And I guess the last one I would throw out there is political campaigns, probably pretty obvious. And obviously it's going to be more and more important as we head toward the next election. But I think it's pretty obvious how the personalization that AI offers can help benefit political messages.
Yeah. I mean, that pretty much summarizes. I would say the only thing I would add is that I think industries that have been historically disintermediated from their end consumer may not have as direct of an application, or may not have as powerful of an application of AI to deliver greater performance. Like, for example, auto has a lot of data, so I'm not trying to say that there's no data, but they've been disintermediated from their end consumer with their dealer networks, whether it's tier 2 or tier 3 or whatever. So I think industries where they have a direct relationship with the end consumer are going to benefit the most from the application of AI in advertising.
Great, thank you. Next question here. How do you expect AI in programmatic to continue to evolve?
I could start. I would say it's really, again, a reiteration of stuff we've talked about, but I think it's just the dynamic nature of targeting and content optimization that I'm most excited about. So just the ability to tailor the message and the creative of an ad down to that very, very granular focus, and being able to find the ideal user at the right place, the right time, with the right message. And I just think this is going to just continue to get better and better and enable us to really do that kind of pinpoint targeting that will, just continue to make ad dollars more and more efficient over time.
Second that. I think it'll be dynamic. AI can just analyze things extremely fast and make decisions on the fly. So yeah, I think we'll just see it become more dynamic.
Yeah.
Agreed. Particularly moving from one, historically one identifier to, potentially 50 unproven, unscaled identifiers in programmatic. It's really these back office applications of AI that I see, the greatest, growth potential and evolution of AI in programmatic. So data migration, data wrangling, building predictive audiences, stuff like that. So.
Great, thank you. And another, just a real quick question here before we jump into our Q&A section. Last question here. Are there any challenges you expect to see as AI technology advances?
I'll jump on this. So I listened to a podcast called The Perfect Scam. So I'm really into fraudsters. And I think if I've learned anything from that podcast, it's that fraudsters will exploit any system that they can. So I think fraudsters will use AI to create more sophisticated schemes, mimic human behavior, create and generate fake impressions and performance. But no fraudster is as smart as AI. So AI is going to catch them. It'll catch up and learn and figure it out.
Yeah, and I would say also, I think there's going to be a lot of challenges related to ethical and regulatory issues. You know, as regulations are still in a lot of ways in our industry still in their infancy, I think that, you know, absent distinct guidelines that govern the boundaries with which AI can be used, I think there's going to be ethical considerations that, you know, maybe need to be considered by us or by our clients or by the platforms themselves or by the website publishers around things like privacy, what data is used to feed the artificial intelligence. We keep hearing more and more about, you know, lawsuits and people that are focused on that. And, you know, even the possibility of taking advantage of someone's weaknesses. So I know, Brittany, I think you've used the word exploit now in a couple of your answers. And I just think like the better that AI can get at figuring out when someone is likely to make a purchase, which is a good thing, right? But does that make it okay at all times to try to use that intelligence to persuade them to buy your product? So like, what if the machine learning figured out that if a person's trying, you know, a person's spending irrational amounts of money at a, you know, maybe a particular time of night, maybe because they're intoxicated, who knows? But, you know, is it okay to try to squeeze as much as you can out of that user? And I'm not like placing a judgment necessarily on that here. I mean, obviously our goal as marketers is precisely that, to get people to want to buy our products. But it could be a possible ethical issue at some point. Like, are there lines that shouldn't be crossed? And I think these kind of issues will likely lead to regulations that we'll all have to deal with. And as Garrett had mentioned, like, they're not going to be the same necessarily across state lines, you know, certainly country to country. And so that's the kind of thing that will have to be considered as this AI, you know, continues to advance.
Yeah, good points. The only thing I would add is that it can be quite costly to deploy AI solutions, and most companies in advertising, whether it's with respect to the macroeconomic environment or just bandwidth, they don't have a lot of time to burn on exploration without specific purpose. And so it's really hard to figure out what problem you want to solve when the possibilities are endless. It's kind of like the analogy of walking up to a jukebox. Maybe this is a personal problem, but I never know what I want to listen to. Or the paradox of choice, you know, too many choices I choose to ignore. And so, you know, we used to think of humans as getting replaced by machines. And now we're in this decade of the augmented marketer, where humans need to harmonize the machines. And we've already seen this where the CMOs are being asked to be a CIO, a chief digital officer, a technologist. And there's a lot to read and learn. You know, we need to be reinventing ourselves in the modern age of marketing. And, you know, how do we communicate what we want, how we want to leverage AI, or what we want to do with AI with our cross-functional peers that are the ones that are going to actually do it, our tech teams. And so, you know, it really does require us to bring teams together, to break down the silos, to be able to have the conversation about what we need and what problem we're trying to solve. And there's this theory of explainability, which is quite fascinating, where basically highlights one of the odd factors of machine learning, which says that, you know, if an algorithm can be explained, or the more it can be explained, the less valuable that algorithm can be. And then conversely, the more complex or unexplainable an algorithm is, the more likely it is to be more accurate and yield better results. And so it's really about harmonizing or synthesizing the machines, but collaborating with our cross-functional peers to solve these common problems in programmatic. Everything is really unexplainable in advertising, you know, to like think about the, you know, holiday dinners, trying to tell, you know, parents and family what you do for a living. So how do we explain all of this to marketers? Like, how do we prove that, you know, we're making progress to our bosses when the good stuff is really unexplainable?
Great, thank you, everyone. We're going to jump into our Q&A section here. We have several questions. We'll get to a few of these, and the ones we don't get to, we'll answer after the webinar. First question here is, where do you get lookalike audiences? And
So
is that built into your DSP? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was jumping the gun there out of enthusiasm. I was trying to type my answer, but didn't get done with it. So we leverage the log level data that is then crosswalked to, and the log level data obviously comes from the DSP. We then crosswalk that data set to the world's largest consented and opted-in data set of cross-channel attributes. We use various partners. The partner that I'm speaking of here is called Yobi, Y-O-B-I. They are a very, very up-and-coming, very sophisticated academia level data science team that basically helps us produce or develop or activate these predictive audiences using their consented and opted-in data set of cross-channel attributes. So they've got $1 trillion of purchase data from banks and financial institutions. They've got all of the different device level metadata. They've got viewership data. They've got precision and accurate geo data sets. They've got Experian and TRU graph mapped to their data sets. So it really is a comparable data set in both depth and breadth to Facebook, Amazon, and Netflix. But it is very different in that it's a cross-channel data set, and not just, for example, viewership data, or not just, for example, e-commerce. And so that's one of the partners that we use to develop these predictive audiences, which they're actually different than lookalike audiences. Lookalike audiences are typically or historically off of demographic and gender, which are wildly inaccurate data sets in my experience. Not only as things evolve beyond binaries with respect to gender, but also user-generated content as user-generated data, as well as inferred data. There's not a lot of it that's explicit, and my experience is that a lot of the demo data sets out there are no better than a coin toss. So those are ways that we can expand the purview of the data set by looking through the log level data to find these affinities, but also then crosswalk that to a very rich consented and opted-in data set, which I think is the most important point in all of this, is that it's consented and opted in, which is sort of unparalleled or not very frequent or common in advertising right now. So they've applied the highest order level of privacy, and we don't even touch the data, which is probably the most brilliant, innovative, or elegant workflow that I've seen in advertising, where the log level data is picked up, the audiences are placed back into this advertiser's seat in the DSP, and then our teams will activate and optimize by developing a custom algorithm, as well as making those manual optimizations to deliver outcomes on behalf of our clients. Sorry I didn't get to that on text, Naveen.
Great, thanks, Garrett. And this is from the same question. Can you do lookalike for politics/elections?
Absolutely, yeah. We are historically very strong with political and elections, just by way of the clients that we've worked with. And so we have a very strong political approach to political campaigns, leveraging a lot of different things in addition to act-alike audiences, as well as these predictive audiences.
Great, thank you, everyone. So there's some questions. We'll go ahead and follow up afterwards. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. So thank you to the audience for attending and sitting through this webinar. Also want to thank our speakers, Brittany, Paul, and Garrett. Thank you very much. Here we will be sending a recording of this webinar shortly after, so you'll see that in the next day or so. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.